by the sounds of it, there's a complete contrast in between what some people think and others. So to try and litmus test it, I wanted to throw out this like social experiment, as I've called it, which is, right, so let's get to the root of the problem by, let's take away one of the elements that's been shouted about the most, which is the money.
Yeah, you get these classic items, Carbotech rods, for example, Normat rods, things that like, I don't know, like they become cult classics, don't they? And they hold the value and if anything gain value over time. And there's like classic Avon rods, for example, Harrisons and stuff that end up costing more in 10 years time. Think there's anything from this era that we'll ever do, or do we just use them too much now?
So who'd have thought it? It's episode 8 of the Mixing Bowl. Now don't be alarmed, it's quite obvious that we're not sat in our usual seats and we're not sat by the roaring fire, which is a good job because we're now into April, the temperature's rising. I think while driving to this beautiful location, I think it was 14 degrees on the old
gorgeous
van thermometer, and things are warming up, which means that spring has sprung and off we go. And of course, once more, you are joining us here on the Mixing Bowl, myself, Mick Viles and Joe Caris, to talk about all things fishing, all things not football, mind the black tape. People have noticed the black tape now, Joe, so obviously it did its job, thank you very much. And I'm still a grumpy cup kind of guy, and obviously all Joe's fans are disappointed with the black tape, but some people
love it.
Some people are over the moon, aren't they? And a lot's been going off, obviously, because spring's around the corner, and one thing that I think is quite topical, and we already alluded to on the last Mixing Bowl, but we've put some media out there, is the new social experiment. I want to make sure that we remember
you do that, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
The All England Champs. So for those who haven't seen about it, heard about it, tell them a little bit more then, because we put it out on Facebook and we got an amazing response, didn't we?
Did we?
Unbelievable. I'd say 90% positive, well, as having gone through them. There's a few naysayers, but I think after a couple of little words, a few of them got into what we're doing. But what is it all about? Because people probably haven't seen it on YouTube, maybe.
Well, for those of you that know me, will know that I kind of like to antagonise things a little bit sometimes, and I'm a guy that likes to press a bruise, because I do get sort of confused and perplexed, and I sort of wonder what people are looking for when they want to be quite bold in their statements on social media or on the bank, and I sometimes think there's a lot of misinformation, which then leads people to make assumptions and then therefore make statements about things like the cost of match fishing, the cost of fishing tickets, and people who can afford it, people who can't afford it, and I've used the words like rich man's game, sponsored anglers, elite, internationals, in the opening sort of statement about the All England Champs. But what it's actually about, or what I sort of, when it was buzzing around in my head, was that I'm listening to all this kind of chattering about what's right, what's wrong, what should and shouldn't happen, and I actually have got massive opinion on what I think match fishing is and isn't, and what it should and shouldn't look like. But by the sounds of it, there's a complete contrast in between what some people think and others. So to try and litmus test it, I wanted to throw out this like social experiment, as I've called it, which is, right, so let's get to the root of the problem by, let's take away one of the elements that's been shouted about the most, which is the money.
Yeah. So you're talking prize money, you're talking entry, even pegging in this case.
Yes.
So it's going to be free to fish.
Yep.
Totally free. You just got to bring yourself and bring your bait.
Yeah, because some of the noise, some of the chatter and the white noise around angling and match fishing is that the cost of tickets is too high, that the cost of just when we launch, for instance, Feeder Masters, when you launch it, it's a one day. If you want a ticket, it's £40.
You've got to be there, haven't you? And if you're serious about it, it's a few £100, isn't it?
Exactly. 2 tickets is 80, 120. If you want 10 tickets, it's £400. And some people say, well, I ain't got £400 to spend that day. Yeah. If you want all 20, then it's £800. And there are people who want all the tickets.
Yeah, because they're desperate to get their hands on the trophy. They're not the money. And I think that's...
Yes, and
key, isn't it?
when they're investing that sort of money and all the other money that they invest in that competition to get to the final, trust me,
It's not the 15 grand, is it?
Here's a statement. In a lifetime, because, all right, Lee Kerry, smart ass, has won it 3 times, but most people might win one of them in a lifetime. And I said most, I'm talking about successful anglers, might win a big money prize once in a lifetime. If you actually do a calculation of somebody's lifetime earnings versus their lifetime spending, we could expand on that for an hour, then they're not making any money. No. So they're not doing it for the money. So the idea of the NuFish All England Championships was to say, let's take that element out of it, remove it, and then see who's interested.
Yeah. And then create something that they can be proud of and they want to win because it's a title.
Perfect. Because if all these elitists, international anglers, sponsored anglers, rich men, it's all right for them guys, they can afford it, all that, then they won't come, will they? Because apparently they're only driven by money.
I saw a Feeder Masters final last year, Adam Wakeling in tears on the bank when he found out he'd won.
Yep.
That's not because he's won 15 grand, is it? It's because he's got that beautiful trophy in his hand. And Absolutely. It means that much to him. And I've seen Lee choking up when he's won it.
Yep.
And even with the Fishermania, you know, Dave Shire's won it, you know, you can see him, he's like, can't believe it.
Coveted.
And that's what it needs to be about, isn't it? Not the money. The money's great, don't get me wrong. People obviously love the money, but...
Exactly.
I don't think... My memories of winning a Division 1 National aren't based on a few quid, are they?
No.
Based on the memory of being there with my teammates, winning it. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. And all the costs incurred are washed away.
Yeah. I spent weeks practicing for that. It cost us a fortune.
And perfectly.
But it's all forgotten about, innit?
In a second, because the euphoria of lifting the cup, lifting the trophy, winning the title, and that... and listen, this quite clearly is going to be a popular thing, and it could be quite a big event, which, great if it's a big event, because then we'll definitely see who wants to win a big event, money or no money. Yeah. So there's a lot of factors in kind of the makeup of the NuFish All England Champs, because by taking away the money, then we've said, well, nobody's coming for the prize money, which is great. By taking away the cost of entry, because they're two separate things, but they're obviously linked. By taking away the cost of entry, that means then that people who said, well, I ain't got 40 quid, or I can't justify it, then we've got that situation. Now, I know there's going to be some questions, I know there's going to be some people saying, well, it still costs money to go and fish because I have to travel there. Well, of course you do, but you have to travel there whether it's free or whether it's 50 quid, 100 quid, £1,000.
Match fishing, club fishing.
You can't leave the house without travelling, can you?
Football game, whatever.
So I'm saying that's irrelevant.
Yep.
If you're a guy that has a breakfast, you're going to have a breakfast. But if you're a guy that isn't going to have a breakfast, so we take that away.
And people say that, oh, what about bait?
You can't fish without bait.
No matter what you do, does it?
You can't fish without bait. I don't know anybody that can. Now, people say, well, I can go down the local canal and fish with a slice of bread.
Brilliant.
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. Well, come and fish with a slice of bread. Yeah. If that's what you want to fish with, that's fine. You don't have to have... And so it is an interesting point. Some people go, well, we won't be able to compete unless we have 4 pints of pellets or four pints of casters. Well, what they're actually saying then is that the more bait you use, the more fish you catch. So then that is then saying that that's what fishing is. And do we all want to catch more fish, or do we just want to catch the amount of fish that we're willing to pay for with £3.90 or however much your pint of casters is, £4 these days, I think. So it's an interesting...
I was about to say, it's going to be so interesting to see, how many tickets we sell, give away.
Yeah.
How many people turn up on the day, because without having invested any money into it, that's an interesting debate, isn't it?
Very interesting debate, yeah.
But we've got a little counter plan for that, haven't we?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be great. I love the idea. And I've already had some really good anglers, some of the best in the world, say, how can I get a ticket? Which is great, isn't it? It's great.
Which just goes to prove that...
That's a point, actually, while we're chatting. A few people said, oh, you shouldn't allow sponsored anglers or anglers of a certain calibre to fish. But I totally disagree with that. I think anyone should be fishing this event. It's the All England Champs. We want people to win it feel good about winning it, don't we? We want that lovely shot of someone.
Yep.
I'd love it to be a club angler that wins it, or a venue regular, whatever. I'd love that.
Yeah, somebody who's inexperienced.
But if Steve Ringer wants to fish it,
why
that's
not?
Brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, of course he should. Because and I think it's worth interesting in match fishing that one-off events, as opposed to leagues that run through the year. So the more matches you fish, because match fishing is not a fair sport. Let's just remind everybody about that.
In a one-off match.
In a one-off match, every man, the people's champion, can rise from the ashes and lift the NuFish All England Champs trophy, because you could have the top 10, in anybody's opinion, the top 10 anglers in the world, and all be on the bottom 10 pegs, the worst 10 pegs. And then you could have, that means then that they're out of the game. Yep. Because that's what match fishing is. Yep. If this was a 3-day series or a 10-match league, then naturally you rule out the bad pegs, because it smooths out the bumps in the road. And on average, usually then the more experienced or the more talented, or whatever you want to call it.
Over a number of matches.
It does. So the beauty about this is it's a one-day match. Now, a lot of people have already asked where it is. By the time this video hits, that'll have been announced, and it's going to be at Springvale Fisheries, which is Markham Moor, just off the A1.
A great location, by the way.
Fantastic location. Which, go on, you're all wondering, is that a commercial fishery? It depends whether you want to call it a commercial fishery. Yeah. Is it man-made? Yeah, it's made from a nice wet area that then has been shaped and sculpted and landscaped so that you can actually drive your car around it, which is the point I want to make. When we started talking about this, my first thoughts were, we'll go on a natural venue.
Yeah, you were like, let's go on the Welland or...
Yeah, exactly. A long stretch of river or a long stretch of canal, which has got 600 pegs on it, because I reckon that with the right amount of publicity and big enough trophy, and the fact that we're going to bull this up and they're going to want to win the title, we could actually attract that many people. But what I have learnt is a lot of these viewers, a lot of our viewers who watch this show, and the people that comment, and the people that we meet on the bank, Joe, don't want to walk 50 pegs.
No, I don't.
With all, there you go then. Aren't we all right? Yeah, even youngs don't want to do it. And the banks have got to be kind of level and even, and people have got used to this kind of comfort fishing.
We were there the other week, weren't we?
Yeah.
And we walked around, we made a point of walking around, and we're like, this is where it's got to be, weren't we? Because it's like, the access is superb, the anglers are loving it, they're catching loads of fish, they're parking right behind the peg. Had to be there.
Of course it does.
It has to be there.
Of course it does. And, you know, so I thought about various canal systems, and then I thought, well, have most people got a number 4 section for the pole? Because if it's over 6 foot deep, they're not going to have the kit. And is it going to be a rod, waggler, pole, whatever? If you put it on,
excuse me,
the River Trent, it's going to be a feeder match. If you put it on the Erin Calder Canal, it's going to be a pole stroke feeder match. But ordinarily, it's not going to suit somebody, is it? So the most important thing was to have a venue that's got everything that you want to catch in it.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of Springvale. And I've been keeping an eye on the results. Method feeder's winning a lot at the moment.
Yep.
Pole and maggot is winning a lot at the moment.
Yep.
Corn in the edge is winning a lot at the moment. The world's your oyster there, isn't it?
And by the time August 13th
Waggle will be
comes
working,
round,
and it's a great fishery.
It'll be nice and warm.
Shallow fishing and
any kind of fishing. So I think one or two people said, will poles be allowed? Yes, they will. But who's going to say that that's going to win? Because that's not necessarily going to be the method that
at the
wins.
minute, the method feeder is doing the damage.
Exactly. Which I think the majority of our sort of crowd, that's what they like fishing. So
I think the beautiful thing about that Springvale is it's not necessarily carp dominated, is it? Don't get me wrong, I think the winner might have to catch a few carp, but they catch colossal weights of silvers, don't they? Eyed and skimmers.
I wish I'd done my homework. I think the silverfish,
I think it's close to 200 pounds, isn't it?
Match weight is 200 pounds, which is phenomenal fishing. Phenomenal fishing.
I can't wait.
No, and so location for us was obviously important. I think I quoted on the full specification video that it's 178 miles from the Tower of London and 185 miles, or the other way around.
Had you done your own work with that, or did you just blag it?
I guessed it.
I loved it. When you did it at the time, I was like, is that right?
But I double checked myself, and I think it's 7 miles closer to Berwick, to the Tower of London than it is to Berwick-on-Tweed. And so therefore it's in the centre of the country, it's accessible, people can get to it. The fishery owners are so accommodating, it's unreal.
Unbelievable.
And there's facilities where we can all gather, because I thought about this. Where's everybody going to park? Where's the draw going to be? Where are we going to give people a cup of tea? And the problem with most of the sort of 600 peg lengths of the Welland, you've got to get an headquarters and then stewarding it, weighing people in.
It's hard.
It then turned into, which doesn't scare me, but we need to get this concept, this social experiment off the ground. So, and of course, you're all going to want your picture taken, because I'm sure if you're coming and you're winning, you want somebody to know. And some of them beautiful photographs that we all study on some of the nostalgic Facebook sites, where I think you've got one called Simple Match Fishing.
Yes, it's great.
And there'll be a picture of Billy Lane netting a chub, or Ivan Marks playing a bream, and the old black and white photographs. And those only happen if there's a photographer. And I can assure you that most of the magic moments have happened in classical angling matches have been missed because nobody knew who were catching. Yeah. But we've got Joe, the camera,
and a bike,
and a push bike, yeah. And so we've made that doable, and so that we can all get together and we can create this fantastic.
I think it's going to be special.
Social experiment, and I keep saying that. I keep saying that.
Special match. Go on then. How are people going to get hold of some tickets?
So you're going to be able to, because there's no way of refereeing who gets them. We talked about doing a live draw. Yeah. That were an interesting theory where everybody sends their entry in. We put them all on numbers, or we register them against a number, and then we draw out the numbers. Now, that sounds great, but then we've got to contact you, and you've got to reply to us and confirm whether you're coming or not.
Headache, isn't it?
And because this is a no-money event, we had to make sure the administration levels were palatable.
Yeah, because it could become a monster, couldn't it? Very easily.
Yeah, because this is what's misunderstood about matches that have tickets of a cost. There's a lot of administration goes into running big matches. Despite what people see, there's a lot goes off, and Fred's messaging John at 10 o'clock at night saying what time's draw, and when there's 130 of them, then it can't happen. It can't happen. And hence why some of these big organisations have got lots of overheads and people can't understand where the admin costs have gone. So to try and avoid that, we've made life nice and simple, where you will put in your own name, address, details, contact details by going electronically. You'll find a link on our website when we open up the ticket sales, and we're going to make it on an evening when everybody's at home, because if we do it at 10 o'clock in the morning, they'll say they're at work. If we do it at midnight, they'll say I'm on work at night. So we're going to try and do it round about tea time on, I think, probably a Tuesday or a Monday evening when most people are not round at the pub playing dominoes. And so you'll be able to go onto a link, click on a link, and get yourself a ticket. And I won't say buy a ticket because they're free.
I was doing about to say,
you'll register yourself for a ticket.
It's so important to stress that. This is completely free. And it's free.
Free of charge.
Just get yourself there, get yourself a ticket, get some bait, and come and compete for this brilliant title.
All you've got to do is bring yourself and some bait. And obviously, there are a few.
People were saying, are there any catches? There's nothing free in this world. There isn't, is there? There's no catches.
Leave that to us. Yeah. We've sorted that bit out. This is what we want to do to understand you, the audience, and as match anglers ourselves. We've obviously just followed the normal route, which is we throw money in, whether that be 10, 20, 30, 40 quid, pools here, there and everywhere, and we fish for a prize. But, when I've looked at some of the most successful or revered or respected anglers, they're respected and revered, not for the big cash prizes they've won, but for the quality of the competitions they've won. Angling, most people know Alan Scotthorne as 5 times world champion.
Everyone calls him 5 times, don't they?
Yeah, and what you get for that is a trophy.
Yep.
You don't get a cheque for that. And now, but yeah, on the other hand, Jamie Hughes has won some massive prizes.
Well, I was just about to say, you don't know Jamie Hughes as the man who won 300 grand in match fishing, do you? You know him as the Fishermania champion, or
That's a good point.
Maver Match this champion, or whatever. All the things that he's won. You don't never know him as the 300 grand man, do you? Or,
No.
Or, I mean, he must be more than that probably now. But.
Absolutely not. And another point that I considered that, yes, Wednesday, the 13th of August is midweek. Now, I can't apologise for that, because ultimately, when you've got the successful places that we've got at our disposal, it means that people have got these booked up 2 years in advance. When we run Feeder Masters League, Kerry books the venues 2 years in advance. And because this is a new concept that we only kind of decided to get behind recently, we've had to get this thing rolling. So for 2025, it will be on a Wednesday, and I do apologise if you're at work, but we all get 20 days plus bank holidays, and I'll have to put an holiday day in.
Are you going to fish?
No, I want to be around the fishery, meet people, get a feel for what they're saying, get some feedback. I'd love to fish. I'd love to fish. I might be fishing on my own, mightn't I? Because nobody might turn up.
No, there'll be loads. We're going to get loads. It's going to be great. I can't wait. Honestly, I'm so excited about it. I think it's going to be great.
No, me too.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see who turns up. That's the thing that I'm most intrigued about. And I hope it's a real broad mix. I hope it's brilliant.
I'll be interested to know what people on this channel think about it, and let's see. Let's
Can juniors enter? Just while I'm thinking, because obviously in the summer holidays, the younger anglers probably will be available.
Yes, because
there's no cash prize. So
no, because there's no money, there's no gambling as such, which has never really been a rule in fishing. But we had to put that into Feeder Masters because it's
been like a bit of an unwritten rule, hasn't it?
Yeah, when it's pulls on the day and it's a sweep. I think there's a word called a sweepstake.
Yeah.
And in the world of law, I think sweepstake is it's non-taxable. So I think in dog racing and horse racing, there's a sweepstake, and it's basically everybody chucks the money in, and it's gone. The stake money is in, and then it's divvied out, and away it goes. And so in this case, juniors can. We do say that obviously, if somebody's under 16 and they are coming, then they would need to be accompanied by an adult, a responsible adult. I'm sure that because you can't walk to that unless you live in the village around the corner, then you're probably going to be coming with an adult anyway. So
it'd be great to see some young anglers on it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, men,
fantastic.
Ladies, juniors, boys and girls. Of course they are.
Can't wait.
And it'd be great if one won. It would be absolutely super. So, that's an interesting thing that's gone off since our last mixing bowl, hasn't it?
Yeah, certainly got some engagement on our Facebook page, isn't it? That
it has, yeah. Well, it's kind of the controversial subject like sponsored anglers, which we spoke about on the last mixing bowl, which certainly caused
that's definitely
some interest.
Debate, hasn't it?
Yeah, and remember that we have our opinions, but it's about hearing the people that watch this channel and the general angling community. It's interesting to know what their opinion is, really, especially as for what we do for a living, being inside the NuFish brand, that we want to know what the audience, what the general population is thinking about fishing, because we don't want to be using our own personal feelings and traits to guide how we grow our brand. We want to know that we're actually offering something that people want. You know, you can't force lemon curd tarts down everybody. Some people like a jam on, don't they? So what's your flavour? What you're into? And so great debate. It's fantastic, and thanks for all your feedback. So great stuff.
It's funny you said, sorry, just to go back to something, but you were on about like people maybe taking stuff out of context. It's amazing how like a flippant comment, this is going back to the sponsored angler thing, can be taken out of context. Like John will say in the car park, oh, he's only won because he's fed 5 pints of casters. Then someone else overhears that and it becomes 5 pints. I suffered with this at the Oaks back in the day. I used to feed a gallon of maggots, which back in the day, but they used to do a deal, 14 quid it used to be for 8 pints, which is unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah. And it was a brilliant method. But by the end of the summer, I was using 20 pints apparently, because it escalates, isn't it? And then all of a sudden, Tom's tapped me on the shoulder saying, I think we're going to have to, knock this on the head. And it's amazing how it gathers momentum, isn't it? And like, they'll be all like, oh, Christian Jones is using 20 pints of casters. No, he's not. He's just using 4 pints really well. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's important to say that, because Don't believe everything you hear, because it's not.
That's a good point. Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
always.
Do you think social media has got a lot to answer for? Because I think when people used to win, I think that what's the word? Urban myths, aren't they?
Yeah.
Ivan Marks took 2 stone of ground bait. It took 4 of them to carry it down. No, it's probably because Ivan, back of his van was scruffy, along with his tackle, and he couldn't be bothered to have put 3 pound of ground bait in a separate bag, so he just carried a sack because he picked it up from shop because he was that busy trying to write his article for Angling Times, tie some rigs for his up and coming World Championships. That the night before the match, he just chucked a sack of ground bait at back at van, which is what you see people do because they live busy lives, don't they?
Yeah.
When they fish regularly, they tend to take the kitchen sink.
Yeah, like my back of my van's got a few different bags of ground bait in there just in case, because if I'm ever out somewhere, I'll be like, oh, I need that one. And you could look in there, couldn't you? Be like, blooming heck, he's got 5 bags of ground bait. I'm not going to use them all, am I?
Yeah, I walked past the back of your van and I saw 6 boxes. Yeah, I've just collected them.
I was dropping them off to me.
Because there's 6 of us going next week and we've all got a box each, which is only 5 bags. So yeah, I think...
Just be careful what you believe is what I would say, because there's a lot of this bait limit thing. I think a lot of it's blown out of proportion a hell of a lot.
Yeah. Bait limits, we could talk about them, couldn't we, all day long, but that's...
that's a funny one, isn't it? It's a funny one, bait
limits. I'll throw an hand grenade into that, ready for when we do talk about it. You know, when there's no bait limits, people take less bait.
It's true. At Whiteacres, everyone used to take 8 pints because it was strict. We used to cram them into the bait tub.
Yep.
And half of it either went in the lake, but then they changed the rule, you couldn't throw it in, or went in the bin. But you felt obliged to take it. You'd be cutting up all this meat that you didn't need, taking corn and stuff. If there had been no bait limit, we'd have probably just took 3 or 4 pints.
Yeah, took what you needed.
Took what you needed, yeah. So it's a double-edged sword, that bait limit thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, there's always people who push it, but there's loads that win with a couple of pints, isn't there?
Yeah, so. And more often than not, when you do catch a lot of fish, it's not because you've fed a lot of bait.
You've not fed a lot of bait.
No, because you've got to catch them, not feed them.
And
when you're catching, you can't feed.
It's true.
That's true, but that's a conversation for another day, isn't it? And obviously, we do like people to feed in information to this channel, and obviously 1 or 2 people have got a few queries, and onto one of them, a chap called Paul messaged me last week and said he's a rig tyer.
As in he ties rigs in bulk for people?
For people, yeah. So people will either send him some floats and he'll tie some rigs up, or...
It's a popular service that now, isn't it?
Very popular.
Tying and rig tying and
stuff.
I think... That's a good idea.
Here's an interesting question. So is it because people's eyes have gone because they're all over the age of 50? Is it because they've got arthritis? Is it because they're too busy at work? Because when all said and done, if a rig costs £4 and it takes them half an hour because they're slow at it, because their fingers aren't working, their eyes aren't working.
It's a great investment, isn't it?
Well, I think later this month the minimum wage goes up to £12.50.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you can only tie 3 in an hour, it's easier to pay somebody £4 than it is to tie them yourself. So that's an interesting point, isn't it?
I think it's probably all of the above. With regards to that, I think everyone...
So it's become a bit of a profession, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I've got to know Paul because I actually sent him some...
Is he tying you some rigs?
He's tying me some rigs.
Is he?
And the reason why he's tying me some rigs is because I wanted him to do a real test on the new line that we're launching later this month.
Yeah, nice.
So Paul's come back to me and asked me a question that he gets asked by hundreds of his customers, which is, and I'm asking this to you, Joe, because you're the expert at this. When people are fishing up against an island on a commercial fishery, as opposed to fishing down the margins, why is it a different float? And I think that's because we have island floats and we have margin floats.
Yeah.
Some brands have named their floats like that. Yeah. What's going on there?
It's an interesting. When you mentioned this to me before, you were like, "What about that?" Then and I thought that's a great question because it is true, isn't it? You know, you'll fish to the far bank with a Cypri or a Diablo style float, something like that, or a muddy style even, like one of them.
Yeah.
And then you fish down the edge of a Fury or a Raff or something with a really fat tip, and it got me thinking. I'm like, why do we do that? And it's really interesting. I think when you're fishing to an island, I think you generally, earlier in the match, you maybe start over there, there's maybe not so many fish feeding, you're maybe just trying to get your match going, aren't you? So by that nature, you tend to fish smaller baits, 4mm pellets, expanders, maggots maybe. you may be fishing for smaller carp, smaller F1s and stuff. And you're just trying to get your match going, aren't you, a lot of the time? And I think you're fishing a bit more delicate, you're fishing a bit more, just trying to get bites and get your match going. So I think everything's refined a little bit more. But then when you switch to the margins, you're trying to like turn the screw, aren't you? You're trying to win the match. You're going in the margins and the fish are bigger, they're feeding more aggressive. You're going to use thicker line, you're going to need more weight down the rig for stability. You're going to use bigger hook baits to try and pick them out. And I think it's just stepped up. And I think you're trying to be a bit more purposeful in the edge. You're just trying to like set your traps for these bigger fish and trying to make the most of a short amount of time. So you're not trying to foul hook them by using a thicker float and a bigger float. You're trying to keep nice and stable with a 4x14 or a 4x16. And it's the only interesting thing is what would happen if you did that over there earlier in the day? You'd still catch, wouldn't you?
Of course you would.
But that's the only thing I can think. It's just I hate that, like saying it just feels right, doesn't it? Because why does it just feel right? But when you're fishing across to an island, it just feels right to be a bit more refined. Obviously, I hate that. Sam Collett, I'm looking at you. That word, obviously, I hate that. But it just feels right to fish with a bit more finesse to an island.
So a thinner bristle.
A slightly thinner bristle, and just be a bit more.
We've mentioned like Diablo, which is 2 mil bristle.
Yeah, that always seems to work well for an island. And I just think you're just trying to get your match going, and you're just trying to catch a bit of everything. Someone's trying to get in.
Yeah. This is a private party.
And I just think you're just trying to get your match going, and you're trying to take what comes a little bit more, and then, like I say, you're trying to be a bit more selective in the margins. That's the only thing I can think, and I think you're using stronger tackle and stuff like that, so you're stepping everything up a bit more. And
I'm just obviously my limited experience fishing like that. What about this for a thing that you've got people fishing to an island which could be 14 metres. Or more. Not everyone who wants to be swinging around on a long pole.
I don't.
And
don't want to walk. I don't want to use long pole.
That guy is probably a little bit more energetic. He's willing to swing on 60 metres pole.
He's got great eyes.
Is he younger? Because he's swinging on a pole, so he's got great eyes. Is the guy that's only fishing here doing that because he can only see there? Is that why it's a thicker bristle? Or, and you've alluded to this already, you've mentioned it, that when you're down there in the last knockings of the match, the last hour, 2 hours, the fish are coming in there to feed, aren't they? And they're being aggressive. They're being aggressive
fish as well, aren't they? They're always big.
Why are they bigger there than they are there?
Time of day, isn't it? I think obviously the association, they get used to people feeding the margins later in the day. Time of day, naturally, fish feed better in the afternoons, don't they? I think we almost train them, don't we, to get into certain habits. And I just think that those bigger fish, that's where they want to feed.
Because I think he also asked, because surely a margin over there is the same as a margin over here.
It is. And there's, even talking it through sounds ridiculous. Like, why don't I just put that rig on over there? Because, interestingly, I go back to my Barbie Banks matches that I was fishing last year when I was fishing just pellets, and I was doing really well. And I actually ended up using a really thick top float across. I cut down some rafts, like really thick. I cut some down.
To a shorter tip?
I cut the stem down, sorry.
The whole thing?
Just to make it fit better in 2 foot of water.
Which is also a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. And I was going over, and until my float went under, which takes a bit of doing with a 6mm pellet on, I just sat there, and it was just waiting, and got one. Because what I'd found is that when I was using like a 1.7mm tip or even a 2mm, it was like this and dipping around, and I'm like, I wonder if I just put a really thick bristle on and just wait, if it just goes under eventually, and it did. It was great. So maybe I should be using that rig over there.
Sensitivity of bristles, because we've obviously, along with development from all our anglers, we've got some great commercial anglers in the team, and we've got floats from 1.5mm tips, which is classed as a fairly thin tip these days.
Yeah, I think that's like your bottom end now, isn't it?
Right up to 3mm. So you've got like the bulks at 1.5s, Cyprias at 1.75s, then you go Diablos at 2s, and we've got Furies at 2.5s, Collets at 2.5s. We've got 4mm in the big heads.
5 even in the clumps.
5 in the clumps, and a 3mm bristle in a normal style float in the Wrath. And here's a bit of logic, but no logic, obviously, because there's a difference. We all know this, that surely one of these carp or F1s, or most fish, can pull a waggler under.
Yeah.
They can pull a tip round, but yet people say they can't pull the bristle under.
Yeah, I think that's a load of nonsense, personally.
Do you think we're too sensitive sometimes?
I think, yeah, and I think that's probably what the point I was just trying to make, that I was being too sensitive and I ended up striking a load of nothing. So you were like out all day, indication. Because for anyone who's fished hard pellets to an island, you get loads of indications. And your float's forever under. You lift up and then no. And I was like, this is...
So you're seeing too much?
Too much, yeah. And so I put the fat top on the raft for the 3 mil, and you don't see any of it.
Yeah.
But every now and again it just goes glunk, and it's like, well, hey.
I love the fact that you said you trimmed it down.
Yeah.
Because you do. Which is what you touched on earlier. Well, you just do that because it's just right, isn't it? What do you mean it's just right? Well, it's just obvious. And for people, and I've picked up on that from you, so just to try and feedback, so people don't have to type in what does he mean by cutting it down. There's a thing with anglers, isn't there, that I think it's proportion.
Proportion's the word, yeah, proportion.
I think it's proportion. And I would the same with swim feeders.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, that's about right. I can't chuck that there. And I can't chuck that there. And the further you cast, the bigger feeder you're willing to use. But yet, surely if you're trying to get the same effect, same amount of bait, same noise, then what you should actually do is keep the same size feeder with a bigger weight or a smaller weight and reverse the weight, but keep the actual feeder, the actual feeding part, the part of the capacity, the same. But we don't. We upscale as we do things. And
it's the depth of water, isn't it? You know, you put a float on that's like that long, that's a third of the depth of the water, and it just doesn't look right, does it?
No.
It don't feel right. You don't feel comfortable. And I always remember when we were developing the colic float, because Sam was looking for a float for fishing long on the bottom and 5 metres, and I said, just use a Fury, a 4x14 or a 4x16 Fury. He's like, I just don't feel like it's long enough. I remember.
Stability.
And I'm like, yeah, but it don't really matter because you've got the same amount of weight down. And he just couldn't get his head around it.
No.
And then we've got the collet float, which is his design, and now I'm like, it's brilliant. I totally get it. But it's funny, isn't it, how we got this little like hang-ups, these little hang-ups, aren't we?
Yeah. I wonder if we could have a rule of thumb.
Like a length.
Per foot of depth, or a capacity like a 412's up to this depth, and which I think we do that. I'm not saying naturally. It's purely based on experience.
Yeah, you just look at it like
when I'm tying rigs on, especially we've been looking very closely at our new line and shotting patterns. There's all sorts going off, but one thing I noticed was that when I'm making a rig, I put 412s. I was using them at Allcroft Cypres, and I don't put them on 2 arms, so I just measure by the length of my arms, the width of my arms.
Is that how you do it?
Yeah. So I know that
how long?
My top kits are that basically, and so I just stretch it like that, grab it, and then time it off there, and that's exactly a top kit. 1.5. I always make sure my 414s are on that. 416s are on 2 arms. Yeah. I'm never going to use, because it's only 6 foot deep at Allcroft, but because I don't like tying rigs, I put my 416s on 2 arms worth, which is nearly
use it on
11 foot or something.
River or something.
If I want to use it on a deep canal, a deep lake, because there's a chance I'd use a 416s in deep water, but I wouldn't use a 412s in deep water. The only way I'd use a 412s in deep water is if I was fishing off bottom.
So you don't need to.
So there is a kind of experienced
sweet spot in there.
Yeah, I think stick floats.
It was a great question, I thought, because it is as soon as I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, why am I using a different float over there, same depth?
Yeah.
But I think there is probably a reasoning behind it.
A bit more stability.
A bit more.
Missing less bites.
A bit more buoyancy.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that wouldn't work perfectly fine across.
Ruling out the liners.
Yeah.
Which you don't strike at on a feeder, you don't strike at on a waggler. Yeah. Brilliant that, Joe. That's what you get when you've got knowledge like that chap there. So we've had a refresh on our brews, Joe, haven't we?
Look at that, steaming, look.
It's, I hope it don't melt your tape on, because we don't want to offend all the new sort of viewers who've joined us since we had a blackout. And I was just thinking then about how we were talking about the ratio of float depth to thing, and it reminded me that I believe in the old textbooks it used to say for stick float fishing 1 number 4 per foot of depth, which I thought, well, that's nostalgic.
I like it. I like it.
And and of course I'm sure they've all noticed that.
It's a beauty, isn't it?
Bit of nostalgia there, yeah. So, Joe were in the museum the other day, which is what he calls my tackle garage. I'm not going to call it tackle. It is a tackle room.
Yeah, tackle.
I've dedicated my garage to it, and he went, "What on earth is that poking out of that corner?" And
It's
I said,
a
"Tell you what
gem.
that is. That's a bit of nostalgia." And it started a conversation, didn't it, between us about what you. I think we kind of said what product, what fishing item did you crave? I want to use the word crave.
I had loads, because I think especially when you're growing up and you're young, you're so keen, aren't you? And you see what these peers have got, especially back then, because you didn't have the access to them with YouTube and stuff. So you'd see these little snippets in magazines or the Angling Times, didn't you, of a picture like you mentioned earlier, and you'd see that bit of that pole, and I'd be like, I've got to have one of them one day. And of course, by the time you can afford it, they're 20 years ago, aren't they?
Oh,
and it got me thinking about obviously the nostalgic tackle that I would have loved from back then.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be interested to see what, because there'll be this will inspire a few comments, won't it, about what people loved and what they didn't love, and what they've still got, and what they still used, but that were a great sort of. It does. It brings back memories, and I remember
Spiral titanium.
Yeah, that's.
Was that yours, or was it just a museum piece?
No, that were mine.
And that would have been a flagship pole at the time, wouldn't it?
Well, I think I were a bit late to the party. I'll tell you what happened. It's a great story. At the time, my poles were very light because the world had gone into size 24 hooks, little elastics, long poles, and of course we didn't have the carp.
Yeah, crunching poles as they used to call
No, we
them,
didn't.
didn't they?
That had not happened.
No.
But we used to fish UK Champs, which had a round on. Back then, it had a round on like Worsborough, Gloucester Canal, the Trent, and fantastic finale used to be on Gold Valley.
Yeah.
And so, of course, Gold Valley got these great big fish in it called carp. And I'm like, my pole won't do that. And a famous local angler, but also a great character, and he's still walking the banks of the river with him, is a guy called Pete Moody. Now, Pete Moody, strangely enough, which alludes us to what we were talking about at the beginning of this mixing bowl, used to drive a Jag.
Really? To the match?
To match.
I love it.
Because Pete were a grafter. Right, he worked hard and he'd done well for himself and he had his own business. And of course, he had a spiral titanium, didn't he? Because he was the first adopter. Something new comes out, and that was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
That pole at the time was groundbreaking.
Would it have been put in?
Put in. So the butt section, that's an extension because it were 11 metres. It were 11 metre pole put in. And
hence how slim it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the butt section were put over, that's the male ferrule here. And he offered to lend me his spiral titanium. There you go. You can kill somebody with that.
Yeah, that'll learn them.
Yeah. If you can't catch a mitten with it, the other anglers, I think he meant, great big bloke Pete, I wouldn't have argued with him. And so I borrowed it off him, and I'll tell you what happened. Darren, my brother, who you now know, I took him out of school, and he came with me to keep me a bit of company. We went down to Gold Valley, went for a practice a couple of days before March, and I took a little stool, and I said, "Hey, just move back a bit." And he picked a stool up, put it one leg straight on top of Pete's pole, and pushed a foot straight through it. Just smashed it to smithereens.
Oh, God.
Bang went my monthly wages.
Yeah.
That were gone. And I had to have it repaired. Fortunately, a guy called Russ Hackers, who was Will Raisin, they were both very young at the time, because I think Will was about 4 years younger than me. And I were only young, and Dan was still at school. And he repaired it for me, because he knew somebody in Formula One racing, because everybody down south knows somebody in Formula One racing, because it's streets are paved with gold. And he was like, well, just buy a new section. I went, can't afford it. And he repaired it for me. And then what I did, I scoured the Angling Times. Here's a bit of nostalgia. Every week, found a second-hand one.
In the old classifieds?
Yeah, bought it, took out the section that was smashed, gave it to Pete, put his pole back to working order, and then I pushed the repaired section into this one. And I used it in Denmark because it was brilliant, because it was forgiving, because they were put in. I think put-in joints were classed as being stronger, but I think it made them slimmer, not stronger.
Yeah. And it made the poles softer in action as well.
Yeah.
They were quite soft, weren't they?
And it were great. And I remember using it in Denmark on an embassy pairs. Loads of nostalgia here, isn't there? And I had 60 odd kilos of bream on that golf course section. Quite proud of myself that day, throwing balls of brown crumb.
Yeah,
Bought a sack of brown crumb from...
Didn't have none of that continental ground, mate. That's what they called it,
From
wasn't it?
Donald Cook's £56 bag for about £8, I think it were, for a sack. Me and Roy Truman, God rest his soul, fantastic guy, massive influence on me. And that was that. But
what a brilliant pole.
Do you remember them?
That was just before my time, but I remember the pictures of Nuddy and stuff with them.
Yeah.
Because obviously that was a big, like you said, it was a step forward, wasn't it?
Massive.
And I did, when I was editor of Match Fishing, we did a Legends issue. And it was like a special, I can't remember if it was the 30-year anniversary or 40-year anniversary, 50-year, and I can't remember. But I went through every single old Match Fishing because I had a library, and I went through it and I picked out what I thought were interesting features or key moments in match fishing. And put them in, and I did a tackle guide, like the step forwards in poles, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
I contacted Brown and I'm like, look, what was the pole that changed everything for you, or was the biggest leap forward? And they said that one.
Yeah,
so
massive.
It was obviously a big one.
There were a green one just after it, which
Yeah.
were a slightly stiffer pole, not quite as flexible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say not as strong, but it was strong.
Yeah.
But I think
Not like that, though.
we didn't know the capacity and the
Yeah, they were overpowered, really, weren't they, when you think about it?
massively. The wall strength's crazy.
Because then your Black Magics and things like that came from that, didn't
Yeah,
they?
and I remember they did one world class, which is Bob were using, I think, on at least two of his world titles, and they were to be desired. Just before we go on, because I want to ask you what your most craved armour tackle was. Years later, I found myself working for a company called Preston Innovations, and Ricky Teal, we got talking about it, and we got talking about lurk, and of course all the Preston poles were lurk at the time, and you remember 50-50s, 30-51s, twin process 70-40s, all those poles were all twin. Preston called it the twin process.
The rat round.
That's right,
Yeah.
they called it the twin process, and the lurk had a twin process machine, which was basically a winding machine that they could traverse, i.e. on a small conveyor, if you like, because it worked on like a worm screw. The pole section would pass, or that would be held in suspension, and a set of arms, like a knitting machine, would wrap at certain feed and certain traversing to get the right angle of the cross weave, would make twin process poles. And Bernard, who I were introduced to once, just before he retired, told me all about when he made all the Browning spiral poles. So all the original Preston poles were made on the same machine as they were. So, because you remember one of them had a yellow thread in it, which was like, I'm not sure if it were Kevlar or boron, or if it was just a yellow line to indicate there was some kind of strength in it. And that's an amazing bit of coincidence that the poles that we revered in the 1980s were then made on the same machine as some fantastic popular poles.
The 50-50 you mentioned, my dad's mate had one.
Yeah.
Because you remember Bennett's on the back of the magazine, they used to do a bundle where you used to get some bungs and
it's
bits
all
like
coming
that.
out now, yeah.
And he had one of them, and I remember at the time, I think they were 399 quid from memory.
That's it,
at 13 metres.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, because obviously we were at a certain level, I was only ever so young, and I remember going, Steve Parrott he was probably watching this, and I remember it was so far ahead of what we had. It had bullet joints and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But in reality, it was like that, really.
Oh, and that is the
Because
thing.
it's a 400 quid pole. But my memory is like, that was what a pole that was. Do you know what I mean? Telescopic top
romantic.
kits.
Yeah. Telescopic top kits.
top kits.
Because they were easy to make and kept it slim and...
But I remember it came with nose cones, it came with bungs, it came with bushes, it came with little connectors. Like a proper package, like what you'd see now.
Go Lurk, I think it were called.
Go Lurk, yeah.
That's what it were called. And they were... Because Preston understood what people were looking for, and they wanted these cart poles, and Lurk were very good.
I reckon Phil Ringer's still got his twin process. Because he famously loved to use it for his 5 metre fishing.
Because they were strong.
Yeah, strong.
His number 6 joint was brand new, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Never fished past
His
it.
14 latex hanging out the end.
So what were your desirable?
Oh God! Because I grew up with the magazines. That was my big thing. But there was definitely a standout one, and it's something a viewer mentioned. I used to fish a venue called Cartvale in York. It's now Moor Monkton Pools, Leeds and District own it now. But back at Cartvale, there was anglers like Dave Wright and a few others who were brilliant there, and they used to fish floating pole with floating bread, 20 metres it used to be. And they'd lay, maybe even longer, 20 odd metres, and they'd shove it over on the water with floating bread on and catch these carp on it. And because I was there so much, I just remember, because it was a silver butt section, Ambassador Elite, Abu Garcia, I couldn't believe what they were doing with it. And I was like, I've got to get myself one of them.
Like a Mirage.
I was like, gobsmacked. And then Maver brought out the strong arm. Remember the strong arm?
I do remember it, yeah.
Well,
12.5 metre.
They did one called an iron arm, which was 14 metres, but it had parallel butts. And my dad, for some reason, where I lived, there was Raker Lakes, Cartvale, there's a few other places where you had to fish floating pole across the island to compete.
To compete.
And my dad was like, well, I've got to get you that then. And he ended up spending 500 quid on 20 metre pole. It sounds ludicrous when I think about it. And I just used to float this iron arm across. And it all came from that Ambassador. So I'd have loved one of them. And then I think the other one was that Team England Matchbox. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful coloration.
Dark blue.
Yeah. That's, if I could have had one seat box in my time. That was
So what year is that then? What we're talking?
Oh, they had them boxes for years, didn't they? Late 90s to mid 2000s, I'd say. Because they were still on Matchboxes when everyone else were way past that, weren't they?
Brilliant.
I remember Matchbox supported England for a long time after probably they should have done. Because I remember seeing Des sat on this tiny little box, and I'm like, it looks ridiculous.
Yeah, because they weren't particularly big, but they were sturdy and they did the job, didn't they?
Yeah. But that original Drennan one, I remember. Because I had, there was one, the tackle shop, JT Rogers, where I used to go, because when I was in the Leeds Juniors, they used to have a Matchbox account, and there was a free draw one in the shop, and I just wanted it so bad. And my dad said to me, we're going to Drayton on a coach, and he said, if you break the club's match record, I'll buy you it. And I did it. I got £140.
Of course you did.
And I'm like, Dad, get me that box. And
Anyway,
fair play. He's like, here you go.
Yeah, he couldn't wait to buy it.
Yeah.
But
and I've still got it at home.
Have you?
Still got it at home. Drawers used to get stuck when it rained because they were wood drawers.
They swelled, didn't they? Of course they did. And
beautiful box.
So this old-fashioned nostalgia and sort of romantic thing, drawers used to get stuck and swell up.
Yeah.
As they did on the box that I coveted. ASI. I think that AS1, I think, is the actual name of them, but most people call them ASI, so we'll go with ASI for the thing.
Why was that such a big thing? Obviously, iconic look. They looked amazing.
I actually think it was a transition from wicker baskets, creels, that depends where you're from, wicker baskets. So we had wicker baskets. If you were really somebody, you had a 6-legger. Most people had a 4-legger. And if you turned up with a 6-legger and it went back seat at coach where everybody else was, you were called from a pig to a dog and you had to sit up front and nobody spoke to you. I never really had that. I had a small one because obviously I weren't strong enough to carry it. It's only a young lad. And then plastic Shakespeare boxes came out.
Yeah.
Of course.
And then the octopus legs.
Which I think must have been around 1980 because Rotherham Raiders all famously had a light blue Shakespeare box with all the names on back. And I know for a fact, because obviously a few years later in mid to late 80s, as a 14-year-old, I joined Rotherham Raiders and they all had one. I said, how come you've all got one of these? When they won the if I've got this wrong, either 80 or 81, because I know Barnsley and Rotherham won very close together. When they won the National, Shakespeare sent every member of the Rotherham Raiders a blue Shakespeare box in recognition, and then of course they could put the advert in the paper like they used to do to say,
the team.
Winning national team, use the Shakespeare boxes. So sponsorship were going off back then, weren't it?
Yeah, of course it was.
And that influenced everybody in Rotherham, because everybody in Rotherham had a blue Shakespeare box. They didn't have legs on them, did they? And ASI boxes had legs on them.
When would that have been then? 80s?
Well, I think if you look at Kevin Ashurst winning the 1982 World Championships, he was sat on what I want to say was probably a Mark 1
ASI.
Bloody
hell. Much older than I thought. I thought it would be like a 90s thing.
No. So, of course, I'm growing up and I've gone wicker basket. God rest his soul, Dave Nuttall gave me his fiberglass Brennan and Hickman. Joe Brennan, great guy. Never realised that, of course, Mr. Brennan was a real person.
Yeah.
Fantastic guy and his son. Rob Brennan, lovely people. And then the next box I had after that was an AS1, and I begged for one. Well, my dad knew I wanted one, and mum and dad, because they, like yours, just want to...
want to help you.
Yeah, and when you're young, it's a massive thing to have something, pride and joy, and it were iconic because a seat box is very visible, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And
especially back then, because there was no faff around it neither.
Well, it were all like rod and reel work, really, so it didn't really matter what pole you had, because they couldn't... Your rod's a rod, innit? And, or not a rod, as the case may be, and we do know this because we've been working on rods, that, wow, there's some things that go into building a rod.
Oh, God, yeah.
And so the box was an iconic, visible...
In all the pictures.
Desirable thing. And I had, of course, what colour do you want? Because you could choose your colour. And at the time, Tricast Barnsley, not so far away up the road from where I lived, all had burgundy ASI boxes. And they all had black seats, and it were quite unique, because I think they had 20 of them or something, one for every member at squad. The guy there could do batches of like 20, and he did Barnsley one, and you could have a very similar colour. You couldn't have the colour, but you had a very similar colour. So I had the closest one I could, because obviously you admired these people.
Yeah,
and
it's like having me wanting the Drennan Team England box.
Young kids, so it's massive that...
Oh, it's lovely.
So does sponsorship work?
Of course it does.
Obviously, because you wanted
the
England box.
Yeah, it got me up line
and it got me. And yeah, so ASI...
I'll tell you what's quite interesting, Mick, because I've been doing, obviously with my chub fishing, it's very hard to find a rod that takes glass tips now, isn't it? You know, like a lovely 3.5mm glass tip's quite hard. And you do have to go in the back catalogue to get something really now.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say, Free Spirit do them with glass tips now. I didn't realise, but I've been going, and I ended up buying a Drennan medium feeder, which would have been 91, 92 probably. That, from what I can gather, and it's a bit like that. It's got a spiral weave on it.
Of course, yeah.
Beautiful bit of kit.
Long handle, I bet.
Long handle. Beautiful bit of kit. Better than I could have actually thought it was going to be. Like a much lovely through action and stuff, and it's obviously well made. But when you see it and you think, the new rods are really good, aren't they? Because a lot of people are like, oh, them old rods were better. The
advancement in tackle, I think, until you actually put them side by side, because if you use your memory, that were amazing.
Yeah.
We did a video, it's on our YouTube channel, about the £7,000 pole. I think Tatler's is this most expensive pole ever made, £7,000. And that was a Diamorphous, which obviously I don't throw away because I've still got that. And yeah, it were great at the time. It's not even close, to being any good.
And that medium feeder is lovely for that fishing that I'm doing. But you can't compare it to an 11-foot feeder rod now.
No,
you just can't.
No, it does go to show you though that some things were far in advance of what they should have been. A Mitchell Match, which I've still got all my original ones because I desired them. I only managed to acquire some of them as hand-me-downs from my dad because he moved on to crack contact close face reels.
I never know that until you mentioned that.
Yeah, and if you look them up, they are a cult thing. The Italians loved them. And then obviously I cut for his Mitchell Matches, which he had a local tackle dealer cut the shafts, the stems down, so I could reach
the spool.
But reach the spool, I can now hold it in my hand because my hands have grown. No other body parts have grown, just my hands. I'm still 5 foot now.
I bought one, you know. When we did that Legends issue, I thought I need to put a Mitchell Match in.
Yeah.
I thought, and so I bought one. I went on eBay and I got one for 20 quid, mint it was. And I went and had a day stick float fishing with it. Oh, it was so nice. It's nice, isn't it? The old auto bail.
No.
That's the float, lovely.
No, they're brilliant.
Fairness, and your float comes back dead slow, doesn't it?
The proportion of the spool, the diameter, and the
you don't get no spin ups of your hook length because it reels in so slow.
So slow, retrieves
right
really
for
slow.
That.
People struggle with bail arm when they were
striking,
and somebody taught me to strike, fold the bail arm over with my hand, hold on to it, and then actually manually override the linkage, and it'd just stay shut, and you could start winding. John Allerton had his own special style where he'd hold the handle right on the spindle, so when he turned it, he was in control, rather than pushing the handle at its longest pivot, and when it went over, the momentum of it used to spin and you bump your fish, and he turned it like that because he
mastered it.
Yeah, because John was an engineering guy, mechanic, so he understood what went. So there was some brilliant brilliant bits
I
of
love
kit.
it. I love looking at it all.
Shakespeare President. I think Mac Boron 3 was
yeah.
something that I kind of like, oh, wouldn't it be great?
Of course, there'd been a lot of Tricast poles as well and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I had an Aristocrat.
Aristocrat.
I think I've still got the flaky bits of the remnants because I think I wore it out.
Honestly, I could talk about this all day.
We all wanted a
Nostalgic
Tricast Aristocrat because Tricast Barnsley all had them.
Yeah, it's sponsorship, yeah.
And the alternative, you either had an Aristocrat in this area or you had a Silstar Powerwine, because Silstar Goldthorpe were also very good and they influenced everybody. And apart from that, you had a Daiwa, which were Harrier, high performance, tournament, you know, and so on and so forth.
Interestingly, I was speaking to Nick Marlowe, obviously son of the famous Roy, and he reckoned that was the big turning point in poles, the Harrier.
Yeah.
I think it was a Harrier Whisker or Harrier Tournament Professional. I forget what it was, but I thought it was the Amorphous, but he's like, no, it was the Harrier.
Predecessors to a Amorphous, I think, were an Harrier Tournament, HTP,
Yeah.
but prior to that, it were called a Whisker,
Yeah.
which had, God, I feel like I'm a tackle ball. Before that, were
It's good though, isn't it? People, these
Pro Carbon. So they had a Pro Carbon,
that's
which had the metal rings that
that's the one that Roger
broke
Mortimer always talked to. There was a big leap forward.
broke world records. And one or two other people, I think, had them. They were really strong. And then they had a put-over version, which I picked up in a tackle shop for 30 quid and shoved it in the museum. Up in Newcastle. I don't even think the bloke knew what it were. I said, how much you want for that? I said, 30 quid. I said, I'll have that. It's a Daiwa Pro Carbon. Hardly been used. And but the put over, not the put in. Then came, and I remember being on holiday over East Coast, and a guy had a Whisker, and I didn't watch his float, I just watched his pole.
Yeah.
And I think Jeff Newby, who part of the Rotherham Raiders circle, I seem to remember him having a special Daiwa pole, and I think that was a Whisker. And they were amazing bits of kit.
Things like that stick in your mind, don't they? Because when I was growing up, I used to fish the Oaks a lot, and with Starbeck Club, and Gordon Thackeray he used to go in Starbeck shop all the time. There was him, and there was a couple of others, Mick Bandy. They got a tournament 210. Remember they did a tournament 710, which was $7,000.
Yeah.
Then they did a 410, which was probably the equivalent of a tournament professional.
Yeah.
And they did the 210, which was a bit more affordable, but it was still been $1.5 grand, $2,000 maybe.
Yeah.
And I remember him having it, and it was like, oh my God, compared to what everyone else had, and it was like
Head and shoulders.
roofers, millionaire roofers. Look at them, because you can imagine my dad, can't you? Like millionaire roofers, like.
Well, that's what they say about Pete Moody. We'll have to set off half an hour before him, lad, because he'll be there. When he ever texts us somewhere near Markham Moran about just putting onto A1, and he probably has a free pass to get over Dunham Bridge because he probably owns it. And
do you think?
Gosh, all myth.
And then this is a hard question when we're manufacturing fishing tackle, but do you think some of it was like better made? Like you look at that is built to last, isn't it? And that Drennan rod I've got, it is like really well made.
I think there's an interesting point there. Well made or over
and that Amorphous
or over engineered.
Probably over engineered, but that Amorphous is like engineering beautiful, isn't it?
But but they've had to make it. I'm going to use your phrase. Not as well made today, so it don't break your arm when you're holding it.
Yeah, to make it what we need it to be.
So the walls are thinner, but what they've done is they've used technology by making the diameter thicker, putting a bigger taper on it
to get that stiffness,
to create the stiffness, so that when you're holding it, because if you had to hold 16 metres of Amorphous all day, you'd finish up like Popeye. And I'm not saying it's the better made, I'm saying that they didn't know how to reduce the material. So the walls were thicker.
Yeah. I mean, that's so thick, isn't it, when you look at it?
Yeah, which is why it was floppy, because it was thick at the end,
heavy,
because it couldn't support its own weight. Yeah. And they pushed things to the barrier. If you made a pole like that today, how many would you sell?
Oh, none.
So is it better made or is it not as well made? Excuse me, build quality versus technology, excuse me, too much tea, is an interesting debate.
Because
we can't have it both ways, can
we? Obviously we work for a fishing company, but it's that line in the sand, isn't it? You've got your Preston rods and you've got rods of that level, and then you've got Daiwa, and everyone's like, why is that so much more? Is it because it's build quality?
Is it more expensive?
Is it the quality? Is it better materials? Probably not. Is it handmade? Yes, because I've seen them doing it. Yeah. But they're handmade.
Every rod in the world's handmade.
I don't know. It's funny, isn't it? But yeah, I love that nostalgic chat. I love it. Because I'm looking for an Avon rod for my chub fishing.
Right.
And evidently, Avon rods are a thing of the past.
Because it's gone out of fashion.
It's gone out of fashion, and I've been trying to find one. And I keep looking for like some old classics to buy. So I'll probably have one of them.
I have promised you a little route round in the museum because I'm convinced I've got an old Coram near Terrick.
Yeah, that's a really sought after rod. That is.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one hiding in the corner.
I looked at some Harrison rods, and then I looked at the price. I'm like, yeah, I'll probably give that a miss.
well, while we're digging through it, looking for your name and Rob, we'll probably see if we can find the Mitchell matches. And you never know.
I'd love to see a crack reel.
Oh, definitely. Well,
were they the ones with like a pin button in the middle?
That's it.
Like a flat.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was an old boy who used to fish the Staveley Club like that. I used to fish when I was a kid, and he used to have a pipe. He used to have a. It wouldn't have been a Shakespeare box, but it was a fiberglass version, like an old black one. It would have been.
Like a Brennan.
And I remember he had he had a really nice rod actually. It was a carbon rod, not a glass one. But he had one of them reels on. And I just got this lovely image of seeing him. He had a lovely black beard, puffing on his pipe with his crack reel, and he just used to fish off the rod end, catching roach. Great memories, isn't it?
They were. My dad had mastered how to use them because basically you set the clutch low, so it paid off. So when you'd strike into a fish, the fish could pull the clutch.
Nice.
They could pull the line off. And sometimes you could hear him strike because the clutch would just give a little bit, and it'd be a big fish, and you could hear it pulling off. But then on the side had a lever, and that lever were actually a clutch override.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to
apply the brakes or whatever,
disengage the clutch, you could actually press the lever, which allowed you then to wind and gather line.
Ever so advanced, really, isn't it?
Oh, fantastic piece of kit.
Engineering-wise.
French.
Were the French, were they?
Yeah, that's the only thought.
Mitchell though wasn't it? Mitchell.
Yeah. Obviously, the French were good at engineering back in the turn of the century, but don't know what's happened to them since. They've not really produced any reels since then. Michel and Preston.
Do you think anything from this era will become these classics? Like that was one thing that I always think about. Like you get these classic items, Carbotech rods, for example, Normat rods, things that like I don't know. Like they become cult classics, don't they? And they hold the value, and if anything, gain value over time. And there's like classic Avon rods, for example, Harrisons and stuff that end up costing more in 10 years' time. Think there's anything from this era that we'll ever do, or do we just use them too much now? Because like you could say an original Tournament Pro, I think was a massive step forward in poles, personally.
Yeah.
The original one, and they still make them now, don't they? But I think
rods and reels probably stand the test of time and become.
They're not used as much, are they?
That's what I'm going to say.
They're not used as much.
You can wear a pole out because it's got joints, and you're shipping it across, and with a rod, it's hard to wear it out.
Yeah, we used to the rod comes out.
You've had it re-rung. I think you've had new guides put on it.
Yeah, got it.
You can't do that with a pole, can you? You can't sort of rejuvenate it or have it reinstated. And a reel, you used to take it in. Stuart Willoughby and John Swales, one in Parkgate Angler Centre, one in Jack Grice's in Rotherham. You'd take them in the close season, when they were a close season, don't get me started, because we sat in the close season. They would re-shim your Mitchell matches, put your new chenille around the bottom of the spool, you know, that bit of red fur.
Chenille.
And they had maintenance kits. You could buy maintenance kits from Mitchell, they'd take them in, they'd redo them, put them back to box. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dye would have a back to box service, and what they do is, because we talked about doing this at Preston Innovations, take the cover off the reel, pull the gearing out, get a brand new gearing, drop it in, screw it back up, back to box, because the actual gear in the middle is what wears out. The body don't wear out, does it? The handle wears out, and I don't think rods and reels wore out, which is why they become timeless pieces of cult classics. I don't think a pole can ever be that. The only
I hope it does.
I tell you what will happen in about 20 years' time. Somebody will wheel out their Preston Absolute Carbon seat box.
Yeah, that's got a good chance.
Because I think people have got them in mothballs.
Yeah, I've still got mine. The only trouble is with mine, it had a bent foot plate. Mine was a reject.
Oh.
So it will never be like the ultimate museum piece, but I still like it. It's a lovely bit of kit, isn't it? Great bit of kit. Have you still got yours?
No, mine was number 4, 004, and I think
12 might have been.
I abused mine, is the truth, and I pulling out the back of the van, I snapped the back leg off. So when
I foolishly gave my carbon legs to Jordan Holloway, which is a stupid thing to do.
well, you might be in luck there. I think I've got a set.
Yeah. But
In the museum.
To be
I think
fair,
I've got a set of carbon legs.
that's a good shout. That is as a modern classic.
Yeah, that could become, because it was expensive and therefore people cherished it. They've polished it, looked after it. They're probably not fishing off it. They're probably.
Hopefully our rods become one. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? That'd be nice.
That would be nice.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. But I reckon that they sat in the carbon box in the living room watching the telly just as I did for a fortnight during the close season on my brand new ASI box when I was about 15 years old.
Set it up in the living room.
And you never know, I might treat the viewers one day to bringing in my ASI box that's nestled somewhere in the back of the museum, but that's for another day. And well, I tell you what, Joe, I think I'd forgot the cameras were running because I would enjoy that chat.
That was a great chat.
So much.
Honestly, I could talk about that for hours.
Well, I'm sure
Tackle.
it won't be the end of it, will it? We might have to revisit that. There might have to be a mixing bowl, cherished items, special edition.
Yeah. Bring a few of them out.
We could put some on the table, couldn't we? And mix some old and some new together. But once again, thanks for tuning in. It's really important that we give you what you're looking for and you enjoy it. And if you can just subscribe for us, or even just like or leave a comment for us, everything is appreciated. It's all in the right direction and lets us know that we're giving you what you're looking for. So see you on the next episode of The Mixing Bowl.